AI agents are everywhere now. Everybody's using them. But in most cases, most of the time, we find that they don't deliver the result we expect, especially when they try to act on real business data. The reality is that problem is not with the model. These models are really powerful and strong. The problem is with the data. Garbage in, garbage out. The issue lies in the infrastructure that connects these models to reliable, up-to-date information. Airbyte, known for open source data integration, is now tackling this with tools purpose-built for AI production. And today we have with us once again Michel Tricot, founder and CEO of Airbyte, to walk us through how they are solving this. Michel, it's great to have you on the show.
Great to be here, Swapnil. Thank you for having me.
Michel, as we all know, that Airbyte built its reputation around open source data integration and connectors. How does that foundation translate into infrastructure for AI agents to solve the problem that we just discussed?
The first thing is really open source is a very strong distribution mechanism. And this is something that has really made us successful in the analytics space. And even more when it comes to agentic and platform shifts. If you think about it, every single team is tasked for how can I adopt an agentic system? How can I build an agent internally? And most of the time, that task falls on the engineers working on the project. And open source has always been the best way for enabling developers. They are always going to be looking for what already exists. What is the state of the art? And in general, they fall on an open source project. They fall on an open source product. And that is why being open source at our core really helps on adoption and the development of the platform and just enabling all these users that are building this new system to just go as fast as possible and deliver value as fast as possible. I would say the other piece is the problem of data connectivity is an completely unbounded problem. The number of places where you might have data available, data sitting somewhere is just infinite. And you have what you know today, but you don't know what's coming tomorrow. And this is a place where open source actually succeeds. It is meant for extensibility. It is meant for giving access and control over where the product is going to be connecting. And this is something that has always served us and our community really well. And it's going to be the same when it comes to agentic system. Like all these agents need to connect to thousands and thousands of different places. And they can only succeed if they have the ability to build and connect to all these new systems that are appearing.
Let's talk about this specific problem that we're talking about today, which is about, companies have a ton of data. They have ton of models, but the connection between, and also just because you have connected something doesn't mean AI. I'm a heavy user. I know it hallucinates. It gets lazy also. It will just read one line of the prompt and they will skip everything else. Can you talk a bit about, as you have seen, a lot of companies are building their AI agents today. What problem did you see in real world deployments, not hypothetically where we talk about blocks that you connect MCP, everything will work magically? It doesn't. What problem did you see in real world deployments that convince you that data infrastructure, not models, was the missing piece there?
I mean, the very simple example is just going to any kind of sales team and tell a sales rep to just ask question about a specific customer. Very simple. What the agent is going to tell you is whatever it can find online. Now it's great, like all these chat system have access to web search, etc. But all of that is just public data. Like anyone has access to the same amount of information. So you don't really have an edge compared to another company trying to sell a product. Now, if you overlay on top of that all the internal data that you have about a customer or a prospect, it really changes the value because now you can actually inject your own knowledge about a customer. So if I can tell you, like, even in my team, we have people that go through self-serve. We have people who come from open source. We have people who come just through a talk to sales form. like all this data is not available to the model. So the model is just going to give you the data that everyone has, and it's not going to make your salesperson more relevant or more lethal than another one at another company. But when you bring all that data together, then suddenly you can say, oh, this user has been connecting 50 different systems with open source. Oh, and they're using all these stacks of application that they are bringing and using Airbyte for. Oh, and they actually try to sign up on the self-serve product. And suddenly, like, the conversation and the context that you can bring to the conversation really changes how the perception of the person in front of you, it changes the, the angles that you want to take into the conversation. And this is something that is becoming more and more important. And here we're just talking about place where a human is involved in the loop. But imagine that you're building a whole process for managing. And this is also something that our customers have. Like we're working with a finance ops startup, and well, they're building agents to enable other companies. But if this agent doesn't have access to NetSuite, doesn't have access to QuickBooks, doesn't have access to Stripe, like the agents basically cannot do anything. It's just going to give you, and that's why it hallucinates. It's just going to say, oh yes, this person had this charge on their account, but if there is no data to back it, it's just hallucination. But when you start actually overlaying your data, your internal data on top of it, then suddenly the agent is working out of real data and real information. And that is really like where the problem is when you want to productionize these agents. An agent that is just searching the web is kind of useful, but it doesn't really help your business. And that's what people want from agents. That's the promise of AI. It's going to give you more, it's going to reduce latency, it's going to improve your operational throughput, it's going to make you more relevant in anything that you're doing. And for that, you just need the data that's been sitting in your system. And we can make a parallel with analytics. Like if you don't know what your business is doing, you're blind. And it's the same thing for agents.
And since you bring in analytics, and if I recall correctly, you folks historically have focused on data movement, standardization for analytics. What fundamentally changes when the same data is now being used by AI agents for making decisions or taking actions, sometimes in real time, sometimes autonomously?
If we do a little bit of history, like you go for analytics. People don't do analytics because they like doing analytics. They do analytics because they want to understand their business. They need to understand where there is gaps, where they need to double down in investments. And in general, the person who is making the decision is an actual person. And when it's a person, then the rate at which you can make this decision is human time. So the latency is generally going to be pretty high. When it comes to agents, suddenly you have the promise of automation, meaning that you can have a CPU or a GPU making the action for you. So operating at sub nanosecond type of latency. And this is what agents are looking to solve, and why companies are so bullish in like adopting this agentic system is to give them this ability to just streamline, reduce the latency, increase the throughput of any kind of operation that they have internally, and gain like massive speed from that.
Now, when it comes to AI, as I said, I am also a heavy user. Context matter. If you don't explain to, or if the AI doesn't have the context, it can't cook things up. And you folks are also introducing the concept of context store. Talk a bit about what it is and how is it different from traditional API or data pipelines, and why does it matter for production AI systems?
When we think about where is the data living today, so it is living in a database, it is living in a Google Drive, it is living on Stripe, on Salesforce, on any kind of systems that act as a system of record. Now, these systems have been built for UI consumption. So a human going on a UI, manipulating the system, changing it, etc., etc. And yes, you also have API in case you have like specific automation that you want, but they operate at a very low scale in terms of how much is being used, etc., etc. So these APIs have not really been designed and built for agentic consumption, where suddenly you have something that operates really fast that needs to discover the world around them. And this is what the contextor is all about. It's giving you a way to discover this information without you doing like a sequence of if then else, if then else. It's just going to discover what's available, and it's going to be able to just, oh, there is this piece of information on Salesforce. You know what? I see that there is this other system available, Zendesk, and let me see what's happening on the Zendesk side. And all this interaction, if they are gated by API, or if you just put, you mentioned MCPs that are not working, like MCPs don't work when they are just a very thin layer in front of an API, because then you're just back in the old world of you have rate limits, you have pagination, you have access management, you don't have search, you don't have the ability to do that discovery. And this is where the contextor actually enables this agent. It's just, it allows the agents to behave with this organic knowledge that it might have by just pulling different string, discovering what's available, and then making the best decision based on how it was prompted or the different type of workflows that were defined around them. The other piece is on everything that is what we call write. So the ability to interact with this upstream or downstream system. If you just let the agent interact directly with the API, it might not have all the information necessary to make the right API call, or it might mess up. It might write the wrong information. But the more it's able to cross-reference data across the silos, the better the write is going to be. And yes, there is always like the technical piece of it, which is making sure that you're making the right API call. But the logic of what data you put into this write is never coming from just one singular system. It's coming from a multitude of places where data and context is actually stored. So that is why, like, when we're thinking about the contextor, we always approach it from this, what we call the agentic data loop, which is first you need to discover and search. Then you're able to write, to read this information. And then you're able to write, and then you continue that loop and you go over and over and over again.
Excellent. Thank you. Because I was actually going to ask if you can also explain how things work under the hood, but you already explained that. So thank you a lot. Let's talk about trust a bit. If an AI agent is making decisions or taking action based on the data from your system, how do you ensure data quality, lineage, auditability in a way that enterprise can actually rely on?
I think we go back to this idea around governance. It's just that we need to expand it to not just humans making action, but having actually synthetic roles that are making these different actions. And after that, the same thing is going to come into play. Is like, how do you audit what information was accessed? How do you audit what information was written? And having all these logs and monitoring of all of that. And you can also encode specific rules that your agent is going to be relying on, whether they are prompt or whether they are just deterministic workflows on what the agent can and cannot do. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to auditing every single action that is being taken by your agent, and potentially having an agent auditing that audit logs to make sure that nothing wrong is happening. So in terms of permissioning and auditing and governance, we come down to like the very similar type of processes, just is going to be higher scale. So we probably need to overlay additional information on top of that and potentially connect that to evaluation systems, defining new rules, defining new constraints that are then being encoded into the agent. But the thing that is very important when we're thinking about agents is they're going to make mistake. And that's the reality of things. And it doesn't matter if today we're using LLM or tomorrow we're using another generation of models. It is going to make mistakes. But the same way humans make mistakes, we should just accept that there is an operational risk whenever these decisions are made. The thing that you gain by having agents running on top of that is that the speed at which you can solve these problems is much higher. And as long as you have a system that detects that there are mistakes, the same way you detect them when a human is making a mistake, it's a net positive because you will be able to fix them at an unprecedented speed.
The only difference is that sometimes you cannot improve a human after an extent, but you can always improve the models. If you do find the mistake, you can keep, kind of iterating it. Now, can you also talk about, since we are talking about, dynamic data, not steady data, what kind of latency or freshness requirements are enterprises demanding or asking for when they are building agents that need to act in real time and you are the one providing them with the data?
In terms of latency, I think it's a business decision, like how fast you want this specific decisions to be made. The thing that is for sure happening is that you can make this decision faster. Now, you don't have to go to sub 10 second or sub millisecond type of decision speed because the system today, one, it's slow. I mean, you need to let the LLM run and come up with a solution. And also, we don't have yet in the overall world like all the control systems in place. And so I think what's going to happen is first, let's get to the latency of decision making that a human has and just decrease as you were learning how to make the system work and just iterate and get that latency down. Now, in terms of data freshness, well, if you have an agent running, you want it to be looking at the most recent piece of data. So that's why, when we're thinking about the context store to give you latency, very strong latency when it comes to the discovery. But if you want to make sure that you always have the latest version of the piece of data that the agent has at hand, you always have the ability to just look at the source system and make sure that there is no difference between these two pieces of data and make decision based on the most recent data record that you have. Does that answer your question?
It did answer. Thank you so much for taking that question. Can you also talk about how are customers using this? Are you seeing that customers are using it for agentic workflows that go beyond chatbots like autonomous decisioning, workflow orchestration, or closed loop system? What does this look like in practice, if you have seen?
When we're thinking about the agentic platform, we're always thinking about the modality by which people access data, by which agents access data, and also the maturity of adoption. And, we're always, the same way we're talking like for self-driving cars in like level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. Most companies follow a very similar motion across these levels. And the agentic data platform is an infrastructure product, meaning that it solves the access, it solves the discovery, it solves the write. Now, how you consume it is going to be different based on your level of maturity or the problem at hand. And having that as part of your chat, well, this is something you can solve through an MCP and connecting it to Anthropic, OpenAI, Perplexity, whatever, whichever bot that you want. What you want is just to make sure that as the LLM is progressing, it's able to just query the right information. Now, if you are looking to build a specific agent that is going to run as an automated process, this is where you can use either the open source SDK or APIs that give you access to this data access primitives. And as you go and automate more, like you also have the ability to just build more complex workflows that are chaining different agents, adding predictable and a little bit unpredictable task with the right gate to make sure that the workflow is executing appropriately and that you're guiding the different agents running on it into the right direction. So that is really how we're thinking about data access. And every company that is building an infrastructure product needs to take into account the level of maturity of companies and make sure that we are hand holding all these companies to make sure that they have the most successful experience introducing AI into their system, into their team, based on where they're at in their journey.
These days, a lot of vendors, they just slap AI ready label on, existing solutions, existing tool. How do we know that Airbyte is not doing the same thing? What specifically did you do to rebuild or rethink Airbyte's architecture to make it truly AI ready versus just a label?
So that's a very good question. And, when we talk about people putting an AI label on top of a product, the first thing is, as an organization, it has to start with you, not with the label that you put on the product. It means how do you enable yourself first with AI? Because the moment you understand how powerful and how to tame that massive tool that you have in front of you, the better you will be able to understand what needs to change within your product. So it's not just about adding an AI feature that is just adding a chatbot and answering questions for you. It's really about how you are designing your own internal systems to power your product. And when we're thinking about Airbyte, of course, at the end of the day, there is a physical things that needs to happen. Bytes needs to move from point A to point B. This is something that AI cannot really replace because the data at some point needs to land on the LLM. The piece here is the consumer of the product is an agent primarily. And that is why we can say it's an AI product, is because it is built for an agentic UX and an agentic experience. The way we build the different connectors, we like to joke that we have not little, it's actually pretty big, a project internally that we call Hydra, which is a fully agentic system that takes all, the open source contribution, all the Zendesk information, all the Sentry information, and is actually reshaping how connectors need to work so that it is appropriately designed for agent consumption, but also for analytics consumption. But for me, it's really about thinking who is going to be the main consumer as an infrastructure product, to be clear, of the data that we're providing and making sure that it is shaped in that way. And that, who knew that search was so important in an agentic world. It's search, but at the end of the day, it's search because an agent needs to be able to always search, and that's the only thing they do. They search, and then they make decision.
Where do you see this is going? Are we heading towards a new data layer that sits specifically between AI systems and enterprise application, or this is too early? We'll see how things will pan out.
No, there's definitely something that's going to happen, and sooner rather than later. The models might change, the architectures of the models will change over time. That is a certainty. Something that will not change is the fact that to make these models relevant, you need to inject data. So what I think is going to happen on this data layer is how do you bring more intelligence to guide the model into, or to get the model to actually populate more information about what kind of connection is being able to do between different records, between different silos. And that to me is a few years ago, everyone was talking about the semantic layer for data warehouses. That was a way of encoding some information in a way, some type of memory into the warehouse to make sure that everyone is talking the same language. And I think that's going to be the same pattern that's going to apply to data, except that, yes, it might be guided by humans, but there will always also be like a self improvement based on how evals are going, the relevance of the answer that has been provided by the model to just enrich this connection. And that's where, we're talking about memory a lot. Like, this is where memory is going to become very important. Like, Airbyte has a fiscal year that starts in February. Well, if the agent doesn't know, it cannot understand the data. So how do you make sure that over time, all this company knowledge gets encoded as an overlay of the data, and ideally automatically?
As you're also talking about, organizations, they have semantic data, they have to look at it. Because of AI, should they change the way they store data, or because of AI, they really don't have to worry too much because AI can really, filter, sniff through all the data and pick the data that it needs. What I'm trying to ask you is that should organizations change their approach to how they generate, create, store data, or it really doesn't matter, they can continue as they are doing?
I would say today, the thing that is the most important is the ability to search. So if I'm thinking about new evolution of data infrastructure, I think a lot more is going to be put on search. We had this whole hype around vector databases. At the end of the day, vector databases is an ability to search around unstructured data, because suddenly we realize, oh yeah, we can do something with that unstructured data. But at the end of the day, an agent will need to have a very, very strong ability to search data, to discover what is available to it. And that's where I see a lot of the infrastructure moving toward. It's not so much about like, how do you store it? It's more like, how do you store it so that it is searchable, so that it is indexed in a way that always provides the most accurate and the most valuable information first.
Michel, thank you so much for joining us today and breaking down how infrastructure shapes what agents can actually do in production. And you folks, once again, are building these architectural systems. That thank you so much for your time. And as usual, I look forward to chat with you again. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Swapnil.